Today's session will be recorded in 45 minutes. Good morning, good afternoon, and evening, depending on where you're joining us in this glorious world today. We know you've probably been on a lot of Zoom events, so we're very appreciative that you decided to join ours today or to catch the recording. As the old saying goes, if you have your health, then everything else follows. And when we have healthy women involved and leading within all sectors of our companies and communities, we all win. Hello, I'm Legendre, and I'll be your moderator for today. And welcome to HER.Talks, an authentic conversation around how the environment affects global health, put on by Her Health EQ. I'm going to go ahead and paste that link to Her Health EQ in the chat so that you can look at that later on. So let me just take a moment to do that. And there you go. And copy and paste that right from the chat. And let's get started here with our incredible panelist. So Marissa, can you start us off, please? And introduce yourself, and then we'll pass it off to Fran.
Sure, I just wanted to say a welcome from Her Health EQ, sponsors of this event. I'm Marissa Fayer, the founder and CEO of Her Health EQ, and we are a global nonprofit social enterprise focused on women's health in developing countries. And so we provide medical equipment into developing countries to focus on women's non-communicable diseases such as maternal health, diabetes, heart disease, and cancers affecting women. We have projects so far in 9 countries. We've impacted the lives of over 41,000 women, and we're just getting started. So we're really just happy to host and have this event, and I'm going to leave it to the expert speakers to take us from here.
Thanks, Marissa. Fran, I'm looking forward to hearing your introduction because, oh, did we lose Fran?
I'm here.
Oh, there you are. You just switched my panels. I'm just making sure we can hear and see you. And you're wearing my favorite pattern today, circles. I love circles. So yeah, Fran, tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe where you're located, you know, what makes you smile, and some of your great work that you're doing these days.
Sure, absolutely. So first I have to say it's an honor to be here. Really excited for the conversation. I am Fran Ayalasomayajula. I'm the head of digital health strategy at HP Worldwide. My background is over 25 years in industry as an epidemiologist and public health professional. Worked with many institutions, including the World Health Organization, and across multiple sectors. What makes me smile is that there's hope in the work that we're doing. That while there are a lot of challenges, and we're going to talk to a lot of those challenges on this discussion, there's just so much that can be done today, particularly with the use of technology, and I'm really jazzed about that. So, yeah.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing. All right, and let's move on to our next panelist here, Jessa. And we also have a special guest with Jessa today. I love when people bring their children to sessions because I think it's lovely and soothing, and you see the eyes popping up there. So please introduce yourself, Jessa, as well as Lillian.
Sure. Hi, I'm Jessa Robuck, and this is my little Lillian, my co-host today. You know, it's a pandemic world, so kids on Zooms is, I think it's much better than in-person meetings where you don't get the kids and the cats and the dogs. So, you know, just here for a little bit of smile relief. I am CEO of VidaLuz Development. We are a sustainable startup focused on placing communities that prioritize access to nutritionally dense foods and sustainable lifestyle choices as a basic human right. We believe that it shouldn't be harder to make a choice that's positive for the planet, person, or community, and we're building communities to reflect that. So I'm located in Ridgeway, Colorado, outside of about 7 hours outside of Denver and 45 minutes outside of Telluride. So I'm staring at some snow coming down right now. I'm not particularly thrilled about it, but yeah, and I'm just, what makes me smile is the ability to live a mission-focused life and have a professional career that I'm able to really try to get that message out to the world that sustainability initiatives are important to overall global health as well. And that's why I'm here today, and I'm excited to participate.
Thanks so much, Jessa and Lillian. Let's move on next to Sheila.
Hi, my name is Sheila Patel. I'm a vice president at CapGemini Invent, and my focus is really on how to use digital tools to help further sustainability within healthcare, life sciences, and technology sectors. I think what excites me is that there's just something different in the air these days. I think that year or so has created a pause for us all to kind of think back and really focus on what's really important to us. And it feels like there's a lot of momentum building around really doing something exciting, collective around sustainability, healthcare, and obviously moving all those initiatives forward. So happy to be a part of this crazy and amazing panel.
Thanks, Sheila. So let's start off with you, Lillian and Jessa. And I have a question for you. So when we talked, last week we had a pre-meeting. You had a perspective that was really holistic and inclusive around women, global health, sustainability, and you talked a lot about the interconnectivity. Can you go more into that, please?
Sure. It's a difficult conversation to have sometimes because people really excel and do well with specialization, even hyper specialization, and can make a lot of impact in very specific areas. But it's part of what we're doing in our model with VidaLuz, but also it's part of my personal mission to just encourage people to think bigger about how all of these things are so interrelated. As far as, we can't just say, oh, sustainability or, oh, global health, because they're really one and the same in so many different ways, and they overlap. I'll give you an example. We talk about how one of the tenets of our model is access to nutritionally dense food. And when we talk about environment and sustainability, how we're farming affects health. It affects the food that comes out to the end product, that consumer consumption. But it also, it affects the environment, methane and greenhouse gases. But at the same time, it affects the individual as well. We have to be connected to our food source, reconnected to understanding what whole and real foods mean in the context of overall health. The United States is seeing some astronomical increases in chronic illness, and what that really means from a societal standpoint, as well as to a family unit. So there's just so many interrelated issues. And when we look at these things from a larger perspective, from a holistic view, it's, how do we really build a collective consciousness that is aware and cares about all of these issues simultaneously and how they relate to each other, how they feed into each other, and that solving all of these problems is important, whether you're siloed in one or whether you're trying to tackle a bunch. But it's really just about that they're all related. One isn't really necessarily independent of the other. So while that's a little bit of an ethereal conversation to have in some ways, it's just important to bring awareness to a holistic approach. And that word holistic is kind of overused sometimes, but it's really just thinking about the problem as this systemic means of attacking climate change, and that's related to overall global health. It's related to food access and food scarcity and food swamps, and all of these things play back into the overall healthcare system as well. So just kind of talking about an overall awareness of all of it together, I think is an important thing to bring to our collective consciousness.
So true. I'm truly passionate about the food area. I think everything stems back to food, and it really does. Mental health, they've seen in different communities if people have whole foods and they're outside in nature and they're helping out with that. I help out with the local sustainable no-till farm here, a couple miles from my house, and we teach those with different abilities to sustain themselves and to grow healthy food. So it really does, everything goes, not just your physical health, but mental health has a lot to do with the foods that we're consuming as well. Absolutely. And it's that I like that community aspect too, and getting people involved. It's amazing. They around here in New York, sometimes they go into the classrooms and they ask, do you know where, your food comes from? Do you know, have you ever picked a carrot? And it's amazing all the hands that go up, that just the lack of connection from the children and the food that they're eating, and even understanding where it comes from and how it's grown and whatnot is really fascinating. So thanks for the work that you're doing, Jessa. I appreciate it. Okay, well, let's move on to our next exciting question here that I have for who's next up is Sheila. Sheila, what are your thoughts on what we are seeing in this intersectionality of health, equity, women leaders, and sustainability?
Yeah, so a really interesting question. I feel like, as I mentioned, there's just the time is really now. There's a lot of great tools out there helping to raise the awareness that we just discussed, Jessa and you, around the collective consciousness of where is it coming from, all of those things. But in addition, we're starting to see just tools out there, just making sure that we're aware of how everything is interconnected as it relates to equity, et cetera. And a couple of examples there from an industrial perspective is clinical trials, right? So the typical clinical trials has struggled in the past to make sure there was an inclusive picture of different patients and profiles, et cetera. So with using digital tools, you're able to now pull in different, economic classes and different profiles of folks that should be a part of it to make sure that it's more of an inclusive representation of the population that you're trying to, focus on in terms of studying. In addition, if you fast forward and thinking about healthcare, obviously the rise of telemedicine and digital medicine, in the form of sensors or devices to help monitor and ensure your progress through your journey of your chronic disease or non-chronic disease. You're seeing the rise of these types of technologies to really help, ensure that patient journey is one that is monitored and getting the latest information associated with it back to the healthcare providers that we're starting to see are quite diverse, right? So we're seeing a rise of women leaders in general, who've come in with that inclusive mindset of making sure that there's a collective way of looking at all these different inputs to come to an outcome. So we're seeing all of those things kind of take shape and form in different ways.
I'm looking forward to even, wearables, it can have that constant monitoring. I just think it would be so helpful. I know I have a mother that's ailing and she's, many, many hours away, and it would just be so great to just know what's going on, from a medical perspective. I recently, her nurse, she was having trouble because she was, with her medicines, and they try to keep her independently living, but have nurses come visit her. And the nurse got this great new box that it rings every time she has to take her medicine, only opens, and then every week the nurse comes and puts them in the right little boxes. And I've just noticed a drastic difference. I didn't realize that, that technology could really help at that level. And it's just been so lovely. Yeah. So I can't wait to more of the IoT, Internet of Things,
yes.
more of the connection, and because it really does help, with collaboration and care for families, especially if they're taking care of people that are older, that are from afar. So thank you so much for all the work that you're doing as well. My goodness. All right, on to our next person here. I've got a question for all of you, so nobody gets out alive here. Fran, last but not least here on my list, your passionate understanding of women, health, politics, and policy and tech are contagious. When you were talking the other day, after I was taking feverish notes, Fran, and then I went and I researched everything that you talked about. I said, this is amazing. I hadn't even heard of these things before. Can you share, around some of the solutions or ideas and stuff that you're working towards? And maybe we all could join on the bandwagon and work towards it as well.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of initiatives, and I guess I kind of first would go with just even listening to you share the story of dealing with an aging parent, right? Many of us are in a sandwich generation, and the notion that utilizing technology for be able to manage medication adherence is really important. But when it comes back to like looking at this in the context of our environment, there's tremendous opportunity. One of the things I'd like for us to really consider is, for example, the way that pollutants affect our air quality and our water quality, and the detriment that has on women. And maybe to set the context on why that matters a little bit, why women, is because, when you think about labor, the labor force, we really constitute, we do 2/3 of the work that's out there. If you take in consideration, not just formal, right, formal paid work, but also informal unpaid work, it's done by women. And so the health of women is so paramount, economically speaking, for thriving communities, which is why, when we look at the indexes, they really lead to the health of women being the #1 indicator of the health of a nation. And yet, when you think about the things that are resulting in the detriment of women's health, for example, air quality having effects on women that can lead to hypertension, that can lead to prematurity in terms of early births, complications with conditions such as endometriosis, that also themselves lead to not only infertility, but also pain and chronic pain. These are real, and hysterectomies, a disproportionate number of hysterectomies as a result. These are issues that we can begin to manage when we started managing our environment and leveraging technology, leveraging the sensors as you were describing, to be aware of our ambient and our ambiance, our ambient environment, so that we can start to not only keep track, but to also be able to use those data points to help drive towards better regulations and better policies. So this is why I often am showing up in a lot of diverse scenes, being on panels like this, but at the same time driving towards and writing letters of support for legislation that really moves the needle on ensuring that the things that we're doing, the decisions that corporations are making, are also done in a manner that are really positive in terms of ensuring the overall health and well-being for communities, and in particular for the interest of women that often get overlooked.
So true. Everything's interconnected. As we started out, Jess started us out with that intersectionality, and it's really true. I would love to see that measured more, and real metrics around it with the technology to show the health of a nation is only as healthy as its women. And that, because it just goes back to, and I like how you said too, a lot of the jobs that are being done are by women. And it was interesting, I heard something the other day, somebody saying that they call it the core. There was a gentleman that was doing a presentation, and he said, if I wouldn't be able to do what I do if my wife at home is the core, like the core of making sure our kids have good nutrition and making sure the schooling and making sure all these things. He said it's more than what's in my day as an executive. And so it's so interesting, because some organizations are trying to figure out, and some governments trying to figure out, well, how do we, recognize and reward this core working class that is really sustaining our communities, like you said. And I think getting back to the data and the indices would be such a great start. Yeah,
absolutely.
Oh my gosh, beautiful. And I know you have questions for each other. So we talked about this last week, and I'll start it out. But if you over the weekend you thought of a different question to ask or a different area to go into, but I know Jess, you wanted to ask Sheila a question around the data and the tech. But if you came up with a different one, please feel free to say that one as well.
No, I think what you were just saying is a great segue into that topic. And my question of Sheila, knowing your background, really is just how are we using data and responsibly using data to either create metrics or just move the needle as far as that intersection of sustainability or environment and global health.
Yeah, so I think we're seeing a lot of different perspectives here and a lot of different approaches, because it's brand new to everyone. But you're seeing systematically companies really take a step back with their new sort of presence of leaders, which tend to be more inclusive, right? Trying to think about, okay, what are the measures that we want to hold ourselves accountable for, not only for ourselves, but for our stakeholders and the greater world community, right? So you're seeing a lot of focus from companies just top down, looking at, what are the metrics that we want to focus on, and now starting to publicize around those in their sustainability reports. So I think it's something like 20% of folks had a sustainability report 5 years ago, and now you're starting to see it going up like 60-70% are supposed to in the next 3 to 4 years have some sort of a sustainability report, which is not just focused on profits and people, but also the planet, right? And what are those measures that they're looking for? Now, certainly we talked a little bit about the data elements within healthcare, and so how folks are, monitoring patients, adherence, et cetera. You're starting to see hospitals and companies, right, really focus on metrics, even get paid based on outcomes. And so you're starting to see a little bit of that take form. I think it's going to take a long way, right? We've been in this model for a while, so it's not going to change overnight, but certainly a look to trying to build metrics in, trying to hold people accountable to outcomes as opposed to just, the process. I think you're starting to see things evolve there as well.
Very cool stuff, right? It just seems like this is, like you said, Sheila, now is the time, because we have the convergence of technology, we have the convergence with the mindset being there, and we have that convergence of the executive leader being measured on it as well. I think that it's now our time, because it's the perfect storm for us, and a storm that, we've been in a drought for a while, and this is something the soil's going to suck up and really enjoy. And
Yes.
something I think that's really, really great to see. I've been seeing in the Internet of Things, where cities are putting in this technology, and I can't wait till we get to the point where, the poor folks in sustainability, they're sitting there in front of Excel spreadsheets gathering data. And I know that, with the edge and with the cloud and with everything that's going on and this Internet of Things, that soon they don't have to sit there and do that. The data will come through, right? The data will be there, and it will be exchanged in a nice lightweight way, and it will it'll be great if the data comes from the source and goes right into the report,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
I dream of that day. Oh,
Awesome.
thanks so much, Sheila. I appreciate that. And Jessa for bringing that up. Fran, I know you had a question for Jessa around the way we work, but again, if you thought of another great one over the weekend, please feel free to ask that one instead.
Yeah, well, an element is around the way we work, but honestly, Jessica, when you started sharing about, the priority around the need to look at nutrient-rich foods, the first thing that sort of came to mind for me in terms of challenge area is dioxins, right? These toxins that are in foods. And that's where we're getting most of it, right? Being so much exposure beyond air pollution. It's in the water, it's in the food itself. And yet when we have these indexes, and we're just talking now about creating these indexes and having these reports, it gets so complex, right? In terms of identifying and making for priority. Like, how do we go about making sure that these things, which we know are so important, don't get overshadowed by other areas where we tend to want to put our emphasis, right? We'll put our emphasis in on things like, I don't know, solar paneling or, like natural renewable energy. And then these other really important topics get lost. Can you share with us a little bit about how your organization maintains these issues at the forefront of what's going on within our considerations around environmental health and the health communities?
Yeah, not to beat the point to death, but, it really gets back to that holistic perspective, that you can't singularly look at one area and forgo the rest and think you're solving the problem, because the problem is massive, right? So for us, you're speaking about nutritionally dense food, and we can even just take that example. In farming techniques, if we're farming for nutritional density and you're still using toxic pesticides, then there's still a problem there, right? So you can't have a singular vision that this is my only focus. It's about really universal health, in a context of thinking about all areas, whether it's, energy healing or different healing modalities, or Eastern medicine meets Western medicine, or herbalism, or, there's just so many facets. And then the question becomes, how do you not become overwhelmed by trying to think of everything and not, be able to really focus on anything? So really what VidaLuz is doing, I would say, you know, our approach, just speaking singularly from my particular company, is that we're trying to create metrics that incentivize policy change, because you have to have really policy behind a lot of these initiatives and support in order for them to not get lost in what the new, you know, greenwashed hot topic is. Like you said, you know, solar is so popular because it's commercialized and it's accessible from a profitability standpoint, but that doesn't mean that regenerative farming isn't important, right? So it's really about creating a comprehensive system of metrics, and to tie into what we were talking about with Sheila too, and it's using quantitative data to back that up. So how are we building smart communities that really responsibly harvest and analyze data, and then, you know, that bridge between all of it, really the core of all of it is education, because we can harvest data as much as we want. We can quantify anything and everything. We can have the most thorough, complex system of metrics and entirely seamless communities that are out there that pull to the forefront every sustainable choice and every access to food that heals people genuinely. Food is medicine. We can do all of that, but if we don't educate people as to why what we're doing is important, then none of it really matters. So, you know, to me, education and policy change are really these bridges in between all of this, because people, you know, there isn't enough public awareness and education campaigns behind this comprehensive approach to universal health, and that nutritionally dense food matters, but pollution matters. Like, all of these things are interrelated in so many different ways. So to me, education is the gap, policy change is the gap, and then really there's this behind the scenes beast of what are we doing with our data in a responsible way to make a conscious impact in incentivizing positive behaviors in the world today.
Education definitely is a big point.
Yeah, the education at all levels. I think we focus a lot on kids, you know, and teaching them, but I try to take some time, and I think it's important just to, the other day I was taking a walk, and there was a woman picking up weeds, you know, out of her, talk to pesticides, and she doesn't spray the pest. She said, well, you know, and most of the people don't spray pesticides in their lawn because they have animals, but they don't know the correlation between if you have certain genes that can be triggered into really bad stuff from pesticides and weed killers and things like that, as we've seen some of the different research that's come out. So I said, oh, thanks for having, you know, a lawn that you don't spray pesticides. And I said, you know, if you have certain genes, you know, it triggers certain. She said, I was just seeing that in the news last night. And she said, the person across the street, they have a dog and they have pesticides. So sometimes it's just, you know, it was like there was a politician, I think it was Harvey Milk, you know, out in San Francisco. And he wanted to push through some really important legislation, but he rallied around dog poop and picking up dog poop, because that was something that was getting to people, right? So sometimes you have to, you know, communicate with people on issues that are important to them, and then have it relate back to regenerative farming, for example, right? Which, if you don't know about regenerative farming, please do look it up. There's a lot of great movies about it that are fun to watch, and also educational with your family, so you can have that discussion. It's important to not have the monocropping, you know, that we have around the world, to make sure, like at the farm I work at, we rotate over 100 different crops and different kinds of things. And so we're not always growing the same thing every single year. It's something different in that area. We watch it, and you know, people come to pick up their CSA, and they're like, well, what do I do with this pigweed? You know, it's like it's a healthy green, you know. And so we started including recipes of what to do with the stuff in our newsletters, and people said, I would have never tried this before. This is delicious. Or some of the quote unquote weeds that people are weed killing, like purslane is a wonderful green, and it's so funny because we started putting it in our CSA, and people started coming back and saying, do you have more of that? I put it in a smoothie and I feel great. It gives me such energy. So it's interesting, you know, that whole thing around. And we got chickens this year because then the bottom of the coop is open, and we keep picking the coop up and putting it in different places. So we're constantly doing that rotation. So trying to do that regenerative farming there. But it is, all about the education, and go to your local farm, support your local farms that are organic, sustainable, no till, no pesticides. So we have some more questions, I think, here too. Did I make sure everybody had an opportunity to ask their question? Sheila, you had a question to Fran.
Yes.
Concerning the indicators. That's right. Let's get to that one before we get to our questions.
Yeah. So Fran, it was really interesting to hear you talk about the health of women being a leading indicator for, kind of advancements of different countries. As we're kind of, I guess, redefining some of the definitions, do you see a difference in how we define wealth, especially in future contexts?
I do, and I think in some ways we sort of already can appreciate that when we look at things like education and literacy, right? And certainly the work that I'm doing around maternal mortality, there's actually a comparison I give when I examine sort of, here we are, the United States as an example, having the highest GDP per capita, right, in the trillions. So we're number one, and I often say, we're number one in that. We're number one in technology. We're number one in being an influencing influencing country. But when you look at the index for maternal mortality and morbidity, we are also number one, and that's something you don't want to be number one for. We were number one in terms of COVID. I mean, it's pathetic, right? And so these are areas where we have to say, you have to begin to question, wow, if the quality of healthcare in a place like the United States, who supposedly has a fantastic GDP, is what it is, then does that qualify it as being the place where you want to live? And would you consider that to be a wealthy place? I mean, when you look at places where people consider where they want to go to raise their families, they look at things related to crime rates, air quality, right? They're going to look at the education systems. So I think these are the indicators. It's not just the money. And the question I always press upon those as we're trying to, look at maternal health as an example, is where are we putting our science? Where are we putting our research, right? Where are we putting our financial investments? And how are we doing those in ways that really give us the quality of return on the quality of life for communities and for individuals? And I think those are the indicators. I think also too, transportation becomes a big one. If you think about where the air pollution mostly comes from in urban areas, and those being the areas where people have the highest, chronic diseases, respiratory chronic diseases, it's in urban communities. And why is that? Because everybody is coming in, traveling in, and they're leaving their, toxic air waste, behind, right? And that's a problem. So looking at places that have good transportation systems and that are using renewable energy, these are the things that are going to become qualifiers, because ultimately these are the things that are going to trickle down to where we're going to witness, and where we're already seeing in places, areas of Europe in particular. The Netherlands is a great example where they're doing these practices, and it's resulting in them having much better quality of life for everyone, and certainly much better quality of life, quite frankly, for women. So I hope that sort of answers the question.
It does. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any follow-up questions for each other? Here's your opportunity. All right, then we will open it up to our audience. So if any audience members would like to ask a question, or if you'd like to type your question in the chat, please feel free, for any of the wonderful people on the call today.
I can very easily chime in. I would just like to, of course, I'm like riveted. I've taken like 3 pages of notes, but we talk about how the environment really affects women, and and how technology and how corporations really do affect women in developing countries. And so I wonder, Fran, you were just saying there is a direct correlation between environment and women, and we're looking at that in the States. And I wonder how corporations and how companies, and it doesn't have to be large corporations, how does everyday companies, how do we impact positively? How do we change the environmental factors that can that can impact the lives of women. And I know, Jessa, you're doing this a lot with your company, you know, and I'm just wondering from anybody, what can, you know, small to medium-sized businesses do as well as the corporations to really make a change in women's lives throughout the world?
Well, I can speak to that on a I guess maybe a micro level. We're seeing the largest departure of women from the workforce because of COVID historically at one time that we've seen as a result of any particular event. So you know, one of the things in the workplace, in the context of the workplace, is understanding that women are inherently, we inherently think of community and others before ourselves in the context of business versus a singular focus on profits or the bottom line dollar. Doesn't mean that we're not capable of it. It just means that, you know, part of celebrating feminine energy is celebrating our capacity for multitasking, like, you know, bringing babies on Zoom calls, right? So what I'm saying is that we have this exceptional capacity for more than just the traditional 24-hour patriarchal work cycle. So understanding that we need to cater to the capacity of women for family and professional life and more non-traditional work schedules, flex scheduling, and just having this, you know, the pandemic has brought this psychological vulnerability in a sense in relation to traditional work structure. It's not about going to an office, having a commute, being there all day. This is my focus when I'm there. Let's compartmentalize. It's a 24-hour cycle. That's not how women work, right? Like, I don't operate that way. I'm doing 1,000 things at once, you know, multitasking in all these different ways. So that's our strength. That's our superpower. So being able to incorporate that in a professional capacity, whether it be company culture, whether it be just recognizing, again, like, I can't stress enough, non-traditional work environments and non-traditional day structures and flex scheduling. These are things that you can incorporate from a corporate level, especially in the United States, because we're just so rigid with these things sometimes. Well, we were. But there's an opportunity here because of how quick everyone has had to change as a result of the pandemic, that we're more receptive and more pliable at this point psychologically because of all of these massive amount of changes that we have absorbed psychologically from a societal standpoint. So there's really an opportunity for a higher level of incorporation of change and to celebrate feminine energy and feminine strengths, which are just inherently different in a lot of different ways. So, I mean, that's, I guess, the kind of the tip of that iceberg that I would like to even just address from a professional capacity of what we can do for women in the traditional corporate sense right now.
If you don't mind if I just tag on to that a little bit, it's showing up in the data, right? So our data is showing us that now that people have had the opportunity to work remotely, it's changed a lot of expectations from an employee perspective as well. So those corporations, whether they're large or small, are going to feel that in terms of retention. Their ability to maintain their workforce is going to be really sort of impacted by the decisions that they make around the way that they will allow for their employee base to continue to work. The benefit for smaller organizations naturally is not only the opportunity to release the burden on the employee, but also the financial burdens on the employer, themselves trying to maintain their financial viability. And so really what I'm anticipating seeing more of and what our data is showing is more of a hybrid environment in which there'll be a lot more flexibility, not only in, as Jessa was sort of describing, in terms of the hours, but also where that work takes place, right? Which could be in many environments. The other thing that's awesome about that is the opportunity to bring forth sort of this crowdsourcing, if you will, that didn't exist before either, because now you're able to expand and leverage resources and experiences and experts within certain fields that you previously may not have been able to leverage before. So it really creates for what I think is going to be an awesome future. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, more global inclusive workforce.
Mm-hmm.
And I think writing it into your job descriptions is really important. They say that, men apply for a job if they have about 60 to 65% of what's on the job description, and women only apply if they have 100%, or 90, at least 95. So I think, right, and they're worried, about, so I've seen a lot of people put that in flexible, and this is what we mean by flexible structure, ability to work remote, we help you get set up with your technology. I think that's such an important thing, to make sure you start at the very beginning with the job description. There's been a lot of analysis around job description writing, and they're saying that a lot of times you're exclusive with the way that you're writing, or excluding things in your job description. So starting from there and having diverse hiring panels, and making sure, if you're only saying people can only work from a 50-mile radius, and just think of the exclusivity you have. Like, it's crazy. You're just you're not including all the wonderful talents that you possibly could be including. So that
the other thing is on the environment side, right? Women being more represented in environmental science and environmental ingenuity and innovation. I think that's a big one, and we'll continue to see more. I think we have a way of perceiving and understanding needs based on the diverse environments in which we have so many responsibilities, that is something that is unique that we'll be contributing to. So
absolutely,
I'm looking to see, more representation of women in environmental science and technology is huge.
yes, please. That'll be great. I think we'll get to our 2030 goals sooner, or at least achieve them, because a lot of people are saying, oh, I don't know if we're going to achieve these by 2030. They're already moving out their targets. So we need more minds and more inclusivity to bring that knowledge. Absolutely. Closing remarks here. So let's start with you, Sheila.
No, I mean, as I mentioned, I think the time is now. There's a lot of different factors coming in. I think everyone kind of spoke about a lot of them. Jessa, you just added policy. You just mentioned as well, Faith, the looming political landscape as well, in terms of, setting our goals high. So it feels like from top to bottom, we've got all the key elements to really kind of work together as women leaders in general, to kind of move the world and the earth forward. So look forward to the opportunity to be a part of that solution with the rest of you guys.
Thanks, Sheila, for that collaborative response there. I love it. And closing remarks for you, Fran.
I piggyback on Sheila. I use now as an acronym for no other options, right? We have no other way. While we're developing, and talking about our sites are on Mars, I want to make sure that the Earth is still inhabitable. So I think
I say that all the time.
Things.
Please,
That's
let's
right.
not. We shouldn't be out there right now. We've got bigger issues down here. Yeah, that's true.
Right.
But the satellites are important. Like the GRACE satellites going around tracking the water and whatnot. And but going to Mars, I don't know. We got some big stuff to handle here. Closing remarks for you, Jessa.
Yeah, I think Sheila and Fran kind of summed it up in a lot of different ways that are, it's about now, and really, I keep saying holistic. I'm sorry, I'm overusing it, but it's really just thinking about the problem from an inherently feminine perspective, which is big picture thinking and encouraging people to think big. And Kelsey, I'm sorry we didn't get to your question over there. And just to circle back as a final point.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's, anybody would like to respond to Kelsey's question there. Thoughts on the future of women's informal employment in developing economies, particularly those focused on agriculture, with the pressure of climate change and now the global pandemic. Have you learned of any new or interesting means of intervention? Thanks, Kelsey, for that question.
Sure. Yeah, I that kind of final sweeping it in to answer your question comment here is, to me, it boils back to education. So that new intervention to me in these areas, and there's a lot of different ways in that question. I feel like I could rabbit hole, but it's about education as far as keeping people aligned with returning to self-sufficient techniques as far as regenerative farming, I've mentioned before, but there's a lot of different ways from a policy standpoint that you can encourage return to circular economy. When we're talking about developing economies, especially, for example, you know, in island nations, there's so many of these nations that have gotten away from being producers. So it's actually trade training and re-educating people how to return to being self-sufficient in so many different ways, reconnecting people to supply chain. So, you know, I would just kind of sum it up with this general notion of continuing education, and understanding that the more we educate, the more we're able to help people be self-sufficient, and that also helps contribute to sustainability initiatives as well.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Fran responded in the chat here. Education is huge in agriculture and also in the home environment, such as cooking and ovens and stoves. Absolutely. Yeah, that's a big issue. People I know the United States don't think about that, and other countries, and the type of things that are being used to cook with, to start the fires and whatnot, and that's leading to health issues. Yeah, it's a big deal. Marissa, you want to bring us home with any last comments?
No, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody. This is incredible. You know, the environment does play a really big role in the health of women around the world, and especially the last discussion. You know, stoves. You know, you burn wood or coal that's carcinogenic, that leads to lung cancer and so many other types of health issues. And so, you know, everyday economy and every day in developing economies really does affect the lives of women disproportionately to other people. And so that's obviously why we focus on women. But this was super insightful. So no, Faith, you bring it home.
Thank you so much to this esteemed panel. These insights I know I'll be thinking about and trying to digest for a long period of time. So we appreciate the work that you're doing out there in the world. Keep it up, keep sharing, and please do visit Her Healthy Q. We had pasted that in the chat earlier. I'm going to paste it again just so you have it, so you kind of can digest what's on there as well at a later date. And thank you so much for your valuable time today. So together, let's create a better world for women and for our planet.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.